Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. There is a form put out on bostonglobe.com. Bostonglobe.com is quite a famous media site, and they are saying that if you are in 30s or 40s and are choosing to live a child-free life, let us know by filling this form. They have also given an email address julian.sorapuru@globe.com. The form asks, why are you child free? It's quite a simple form. Why are you choosing to live a child free life? How old are you? What city you live in? And name and phone number, and that is it. Now, you might think this is child free. And I know child free is different than antinatalism. One is a personal choice, another one is a philosophical, moral, and ethical argument. But I don't think it is inconsistent to say if you are child free and antinatalist that you are child free because of antinatalistic reasons. At least for me, I have filled this form saying that I am child free because I believe in antinatalism, because I think it is immoral to have children, to bring somebody into existence. So you can also, if you agree with me, you can do that. There is also another news by MLP Torres. MLP Torres, as you know, has written a book on human extinction. They study eschatology, like the end of times or end of the world and so on. And they have tweeted saying they have just written an article with the title, "Do We Live in Hell?" I don't know when and where that article is going to be published. They are hinting that they might put it on Substack. I'm looking forward to that article. And I don't know if by hell they mean just the state of world that it is today, or the state of the world considering the historical context, or the state of the world which will always be hell no matter what, given the structure of the universe. I don't know what nuances are covered. We'll see. And we'll, of course, when the article is in, we will review that article as well. Another point I want to say is that the thumbnail you might feel that the thumbnail is a bit of a clickbaity because it says poor man's Schopenhauer, but we spend relatively less time talking about that poor man's Schopenhauer. Even though we spend less time, it is really the highlight of this week, and therefore the thumbnail. We will look at who is that poor man's Schopenhauer later in the video. There was a new paper published in Springer Link with the title "Procreating in an Overpopulated World, Role Moralities and the Climate Crisis" by Craig Stanbury. It was published on 21st of May. Looking at the title, you might think this is an environmental issue. This is not antinatalism proper. But hold on, we will look at the arguments in the paper, and then I'm going to try and show how they can be easily extrapolated to antinatalism proper. The author says that they are neither antinatalist nor pronatalist, and they say that procreation should be permissible in certain cases with certain constraints in place. This is very similar line of argument to Christine Overall, for example, or David Wasserman, and both of them are referred to heavily in the paper. The author talks about role moralities or role-based duties. They say that when we are doing a role in a society, along with that role or because of that role, we have some duties. So for example, doctors have certain duties to patients which other people, rest of non-doctors, don't have. When pilots are flying planes, they have certain duties which passengers and rest of the people don't have. So this is role moralities or role-based duties. So parents, they are also in a role of parent. They have certain duties which mainly revolve around the well-being of the children. So they have duties towards the children. The author distinguishes parents and prospective parents. Prospective parents being people who want to have a child in the future. The main distinction, the author says, is in the distinction between the role-based duties that prospective parents have compared to what parents have. The main focus, the author says, is on prospective parents in the affluent countries with higher emissions. So rich countries have high emissions, per capita emissions, compared to poorer countries who have low emissions per capita. And the reason they say they want to focus on prospective parents of affluent countries where the birth rate is low as compared to high birth rate in poorer countries is that people in poorer countries don't necessarily have easy access to contraception, and women in general are not in full control of their fertility. And therefore, they want to focus on prospective parents in richer countries with high emission rate and low birth rate. Now, when they're talking about prospective parents, they say that these prospective parents have two kinds of role-based duties. One is towards the prospective child they're going to create, that they should have a good intention. They should have an intention to take care of the child, to make sure the well-being of the child, and to provide goods to that child. That intention, they say, is not like a theoretical intention, like you fill a form and say, I have an intention and sign it, but an attitude, a behavior. You're making sure you have enough money, you're making sure you're capable of taking care of children, and so on. As long as you have that intention, the author says, that duty towards the prospective child is fulfilled and you are permitted to procreate, to have that child. This line of thinking also, I think, is presented by David Wasserman. But the author says, on top of that, you also have one more role based duty, and that is a duty to the existing society in the light of existing problems. Today's problems are overpopulation and climate crisis. And therefore, they say that prospective parents have a duty to consider the concerns of overpopulation and climate crisis. It is not like a supererogatory concern. They say it is a duty, so much so that they think that they are answerable to society. So, for example, when we think about procreation in general, I'm not saying just antinatalists, but general people, when they think of procreation, they think it's a personal choice. So, when you meet somebody who is pregnant, you say congratulations. You might have some questions to them like, why are you bringing this child into this overpopulated world if you think overpopulation is a reality? But you don't say that because you think it's none of your business, it is a personal choice. The author says that is not the case. It is perfectly valid for you to ask a question to that person, that have you thought about overpopulation and have you thought about climate crisis? So this concern that they should have thought about is the duty, a role-based duty that prospective parents have, which according to author, nobody else has raised. So they have two duties, one to the prospective child and another to the existing society. These are the arguments which are made in the paper. Now, I have two criticisms. I'm going to start my criticism with a weaker point. The focus on prospective parents of only affluent countries is a bit of a generalization, because there are many people in poorer countries where there is high birth rate and low emissions per capita who have very good access to contraception, and there are many women there who are in full control of their fertility. I live in India, which is considered to be a poor country. It is a poor country. And there is a sizable chunk of the population. I don't know whether it is majority or minority, but a sizable chunk has good access to contraception and has full control on their fertility. In fact, child-free women is a rising trend even in India. So this set of people should be considered. Along with that, even though people in affluent countries would have all those good things, there would still be some minority people who, just because they happen to be in lower economic class, would not fully have access to these things. And they might be minority, but I'm not sure they would be, if they would be insignificant minority. Therefore, they should also be considered. Now, this is a weak criticism because the argument can still easily be qualified to consider these two sets of people, and the argument can still stand. The second part of my criticism is a bit stronger. The two arguments which are presented here, the role-based duty towards prospective child and the role-based duty towards existing society. The author says that as far as the intention to take care of the child is good and it is there, the procreation is permissible because you have an intention to minimize the suffering of that child. But stopping at the point of intention seems arbitrary to me, because no matter how genuine your intention is, you can never guarantee that that child will never suffer. The only way to guarantee that the child will never suffer is to not bring that child into existence, which is the philanthropic argument for antinatalism. So why stop at intention, and why not just go full way to make sure that you want to guarantee the suffering, you want to guarantee that the child doesn't suffer? That is not clear, but if you go there, then you end up into philanthropic argument for antinatalism. The second point, where we have where we have duties towards existing society, the author seems to be thinking only in terms of the current problems, that overpopulation and climate crisis. But what if those problems are solved? Let's say in another 500 years, we've solved overpopulation, we've reduced our numbers to 1 billion people, and partly because of that and partly because of reduced emissions and technology and so on, we have reduced our carbon emissions, we've solved the climate crisis, carbon cycle is restored, everything is hunky-dory, we are living in a sustainable society. Would that guarantee that there would be no problems in that future society? I don't think so. I cannot guess what those problems are, but I can surely confidently say that that society would still have some problems, different kinds of problems, but the problems would be there. And in that scenario, these prospective parents would be answerable to that existing society in the light of those current problems. This kind of argument is just a slice or subset of a grander misanthropic argument. Any any sentient being who comes into existence will cause some harm, will contribute to the harm to the existing sentient beings. It could be in terms of climate problem, overpopulation, contributing to the competition of resources, carbon footprint, or any future problems. There would always be some harm. You cannot imagine a sentient being who would come into existence and will not cause harm to any other sentient being in their life. They can at least indirectly consume something which was produced in an unjust way. They could eat meat which from the animals which were raised in factory farms, or even if you imagine the entire world has gone vegan, they would still be causing accidents. There would be road kills. They would be putting risks onto somebody else, and so on. You cannot imagine a sentient being which will not cause harm to other beings, as much as you cannot imagine a sentient being which will not suffer. So the causing harm, this misanthropic argument, is as fundamental to antinatalism as philanthropic argument. So therefore, stopping at only current problem also seems to be arbitrary to me. And if you extrapolate that to entire misanthropic argument, you get full misanthropic argument for antinatalism. And earlier we got philanthropic argument for antinatalism, and that is antinatalism proper. There was a book published last year, I think somewhere January 2023, called The Tango of Ethics, Intuition, Rationality, and the Prevention of Suffering by Jonathan Leighton. Jonathan Leighton is the director of an organization called Organization for the Prevention of Intense Suffering, OPIS. And he has written this book now. This is not a new news. But the new thing is he has given a new talk about this book in this week. This is the video. He's talking about the book. Now, in the whole video, they don't talk about antinatalism. The word antinatalism is not even mentioned, and not just the word, but the concept of having children, whether we should have children or not, nothing of that sort is mentioned. But what I thought was that in order to reach to antinatalism, we need to accept some arguments for antinatalism. And the basis of those arguments are the dynamics between suffering and happiness. Those are the words Jonathan uses, or benefits and harms, or pleasures and pain, and so on. And Jonathan here talks very interestingly, he puts some interesting points about the fundamental asymmetries of suffering and happiness. So for example, if there is suffering, if there is a person who is suffering, for example, you cannot compensate that suffering by creating 1,000 happy people. Things like that he talks about. There are so many nuances and so many asymmetries in this. He talks about all of that, and within those asymmetries is also a contradiction that we want to reduce suffering on the one hand, but we also want to survive. We have an existential bias, as Thomas Metzinger calls it. And there is this contradiction between these two things, and the dance of sort of feelings and intuitions that is going on, which I think is called Tango of Ethics. The talk is extremely helpful in understanding the nuances of the arguments on which antinatalism is based on. Most of Jonathan Leighton's line of argument, I think, is negative utilitarian. He proposes a new framework called XNU+, where X stands for reduction of suffering and NU is negative utilitarianism, but NU plus something else. Now, maybe you might not agree with the framework. He comes from effective altruism's point of view. I have not read the book myself, even though I'm hyper curious about the book after listening to this talk. But whether we agree with that framework or not, the points that he makes are extremely essential to understanding the arguments for antinatalism is what I thought. And therefore, I thought I should mention this. This was a extremely nice talk, very nice talk, and it deserves more views than what it has on the screen. So I urge everybody to go and have a look. There is a channel called Daniel McClare. It seems to be a big channel, like 138,000 subscribers. They have put out a video with the title, "Today's babies will someday ask their parents, why did you bring me into this hell?" The video seems to be criticizing parents pretty harshly. I don't think I disagree with anything what is said in the video on a logical level, but I think it's just a different style. I usually go into analytical, boring, philosophical, unemotional arguments detached from emotions, whereas this is very much appeal to emotion, very strong, harsh criticism on parents. And I could maybe make a response video or a supplementary video to this, but I'm afraid this will raise some copyright flags. So I'll leave it at that, but a video worth watching. As you can see on the screen, there was a video put out by Lawrence talking about Kurnig. So the discussion was between Lawrence, Karim Akerma, who is a now well-known philosopher, and Lenny, who is doing special research in this person, Kurnig. Who was Kurnig? What is his relation to antinatalism? In sort of environment and culture and time was he writing about antinatalism? Why do they think he was the first modern antinatalist? Why do they think he was the first antinatalist activist? These are some of the questions they discuss. They also talk about why his work was called Toxic Mushroom of Pessimism. So, why was his work banned in countries like France and Germany? What is his relation to the current voluntary human extinction movement? Why was he recognized by UNESCO for his work in education? What has neo-nihilism to do with anti-procreation? And why was he called poor man's Schopenhauer? That was, I think, very interesting. Why was he called poor man Schopenhauer? What does it even mean to say poor man Schopenhauer? These are some of the questions they also discuss. And then there was a woman they discussed called Marie Ho or Hoth. I'm not going to be able to say her name. And she was at the same time as this person, Kurnig. And there was a suspicion that Kurnig was actually that lady. Kurnig is a pseudonym. And there was a suspicion that Kurnig actually was this Marie Ho lady who was also probably antinatalist. And she was writing under the name of Kurnig. They talk about why they suspected this was the case and if it was true or not. So overall, very interesting video. The video was just short of 2 hours, but absolutely interesting. I heard it at a normal speed and I heard some sections again and again. So thank you, Lawrence, Karim, and Lenny for doing it. I think Lenny is continuing his research work on Kurnig. So if anybody knows anything, feel free to contact him. Absolutely fantastic work. We need to do research on figures in history about antinatalism like this.